right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Marlins 9. As always, I'm your host, Jeremiah Geiger. State of the Marlins episode with Joe Frisaro. Joe, thanks for coming back on. How you doing?
Good, Jeremiah. How you doing? I hope everyone out there enjoyed the playoffs, the World Series, and get ready to see what the offseason looks like here in Miami and around Major League Baseball. Happy to be back.
Yeah, I mean, with baseball, it's one of those sports. As soon as it ends, the offseason starts. Winter meetings in a couple months. So a lot to unpack as we move forward with this podcast. But just really quickly touch on the World Series. My thoughts were, if you're a Yankee fan, and I was rooting for the Yankees, you got to be kicking yourself because it felt like one that certainly got away. Lots of bad decisions. Um, just from game one, I would have brought in a different left-hander. You bring in somebody that hadn't pitched in over a month, and Freddie Freeman turns into Barry Bonds, hits the walk-off grand slam. And then last game, just terrible defense, just terrible. Looked like the Marlins out there in the World
Yeah.
Series. But any thoughts you had, Joe?
Yeah, if we want to talk specifically the World Series, and I'm in agreement. Obviously, congrats to the Dodgers and Miggy Rowe. I'm very happy for Miguel Rojas. I know a lot of people within the organization of the Dodgers, so I'm happy for them to have won a World Series over 162. And they were clearly the most deserving team, and it gets down to execution. But I did want the Yankees to win mainly because of Stanton. I wanted to see Giancarlo get a ring, and after next year, I will be eligible to vote for the Hall of Fame. So when time comes, if he's a 500 homer guy with a World Series ring, an MVP in the National League, and all those other things, you never say exactly who you vote for until you get a chance. But it would strengthen Giancarlo's legacy. Happy for Jazz, to go into play in that environment. Happy for John Birdie for the same reasons. But, as a baseball fan, as someone who understands just how hard it is to win a World Series, to make it to a World Series, you tip your hat, because once you get the two best teams and once you get on that stage, if you're not executing and the other team is, talent
Right.
levels are pretty close. Dodgers were probably the better team. I think I picked them in 6. But when you look at, if you're a Yankee fan, you're looking at game 1 was certainly winnable, and game 5, is winnable. So you end up, if you win those two, you're up 3-1. Rather than, but if we're going to just look at game 5 and the implosion, Jeremiah, as someone who covered the '03 Marlins and saw what every out took in a postseason, not just the World Series, but the postseason, and someone who was at Wrigley Field for the Bartman game, someone who was in Yankee Stadium for Beckett in Game 6, and all the games in between, why the Marlins won in '03 was they rose to the occasion whenever it was the time it mattered the most. But when you're the Yankees in that 5th inning, and to be honest, it was a little giddy before that, because when Stanton homered to make it 5-0, it almost was like game over.
Right.
And I mean, if anyone's seen the Dodgers at all this year, and I watch a lot of their games, it ain't over with the Dodgers, And we've seen so many, this age of baseball, 5-run leads are not as invincible as they used to be, because guys are, you get a walk, an error, and 3-run homer, you're right back in it. So I thought they lacked focus. I thought they lacked discipline. Obviously, Judge dropping the fly ball was ominous. But then Volpe bouncing the throw to Jazz when the play's at third, he sped the game up. But then Garrett Cole does a great job getting the 2 strikeouts, and he doesn't cover first base, which is completely inexcusable. And the passing off on anyone who's passing on Anthony Rizzo just does not know the sport at this level. For one, you don't say, well, Cole was way up here. If you look at the photo, and he had to go 7 feet, and he had to go. Well, you don't go that way. You go towards the base to cover the base. And sometimes, the thing with these, and I'm all for guys making all the money in the world, but you can't forget that you have to do, especially when everything's on the line, the most basic thing. And it's a lack of fundamentals that's the data in era has introduced, because the folk, and it happens at the youth level. And I cover a lot of the high school sports. I see bad base running. I see bad fundamentals and covering bases. I see guys not knowing what to do. But if a guy throws 95 or hits the ball 100 miles an hour at a perfect game event, we know about it. But if a guy can do the little things in the game, that's somehow frowned upon and not stressed enough. And to be honest, base running needs to be stressed more. PFPs need to be stressed more. And Garrett Cole, I mean, if Cole had just owned it, but it didn't sound like he really did. Like, hey, my bad. I mean, he's Garrett Cole. He's iconic. He's a Hall of Fame caliber player. That's going to be eating at him for a long time. And the Yankee fans, after that fifth inning, as much storied history as the Yankees have, that's an epic. I've never seen such an epic fail by the Yankees. Yeah, it's one thing when they lost to the Marlins, they were just outplayed and lost to the team was better in that series. They just didn't kick the ball around and not know what they were doing, and not covering bases, or just making brain farts, or looking like it was all over because they had a couple of run lead early in the game. So I know I'm rambling about it, but it's again, you want to be the best of the best. That margin's who's going to execute. And the Dodgers, like they've done pretty much all year, did it better.
Well, execution to the finest detail, just like you said. I mean, it starts in spring training, but even like you said, in youth ball, high school ball, pitcher fielding drills, covering first base, how to handle a bunt, like those things are, we look at them insignificant parts of the game per
They're
se when
monotonous. They're
compared.
boring. They're
Right.
not the fun thing.
And then ultimately it costs the Yankees, a chance to extend the series and it ends their season earlier. Like it's almost ironic how a play as simple as that, as Cole not covering first base, a $300 million pitcher that he is, not covering
Yeah.
first base costs that inning, and who knows, maybe it cost him the game because that opened the door for the Dodgers to continue scoring. But I just thought that was a very ironic way for the season to end. Something that is taught on literally the first, second day of spring training when all the guys are up there. And that's how, at the biggest stage, the Dodgers kind of capitalize and win the World Series.
Yeah, and that's what people got to realize, when you're talking about a championship, and that's, we'll get to the Marlins in a little bit. It's like, this is the big leagues. This isn't just a participation league. This isn't just, this is the standard. And
Right.
that's why not, no matter what it is, you don't lower it. You don't just water it down. You don't just minimize it. You don't just apologize for, you know, um, doing the basics right. And if there's a lesson to younger players or fans even that want to grasp this game, just know it becomes the team concept of how do you execute, like you say, a very fundamental play. The fact that, again, I'm amazed just how many people do not know baseball that are just trashing Rizzo and trying to make the math of it. Oh, he could have, he
Right.
should have made the play. Now, on top of that, things do happen. And, maybe Y03, if they made an error or whatever, if they always hear about, hey, pick your teammate up, pick the guy up, if a guy leaves, or if there's one out and the guy's on third and the guy strikes out, he doesn't get the guy home. The guy coming to bat sometimes will like, I'll pick you up, and they'll try to get that run in, because that no one feels worse than the guy who didn't get the run in, coming back to the dugout, not getting the job done. So there's that team concept, and it's always the fear of the teams with those $300 million players, because you really, Aaron Boone can't yell at Garrett Cole. He can, but he gets fired because the player goes to the owner and says, I don't want to be yelled at, and he's like, I'm getting my 300 million, and he's getting his 3 million. He's the one who's going to go. So that kind of is how it is, and that's why I wish Cole would have just completely owned it. Hey, I should have
Right.
been over there. And then he's like, you know what? I could have picked him up or picked myself up by getting Freddie Freeman out. You didn't have to give out the 2-out hit to Freddie. And then followed up with Teoscar Hernandez, who always came up big. And next thing it's a 5-5 game. And and the Dodgers are just sitting there going, "Okay, we're not going home to clinch. We could do it here tonight. We could be popping champagne tonight." And they're wired that way. And to Dave Roberts' credit, and to their players and their team concept, and I'll get to, we kind of lose as a fan base here in Miami because we have 100% data driven team, that it isn't a team because they really devalue the people, and they're seeing the consequences of that. Why no one wants to manage this team is Nick Castellanos made a comment in the one game the Phillies won against the Mets, and he ended up getting the game-winning hit. And he goes, team baseball, I'm paraphrasing, and maybe I'm direct quoting him, team baseball is the funnest or best baseball, where you're not worried so much about hey, we lost today, but us 2 for 4 with a bomb or 3 RBIs. So the other guys, I did my part. He'd rather go 0 for 4 and throw the tying run out at home to win the game in the ninth.
Right.
Nick Castellanos takes that trade off.
Winning's fun.
Sadly, we have too many people will sit around and they'll trash Luis Ariz for only winning his third straight batting title and say, well, and we know who they are.
Oh, they're still
But
doing it. Like
yeah, they still
today.
do
Like
it, but
it's
they're the
insane.
people who don't get it, and that's why I refer to them as beyond hope. But I'm here not just to trash on everybody, but to provide hope that that's the type of baseball that wins.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. That's why I refer to you lose 100 games. Who cares if you lost 98 or 102 games by that point? It's you're out of it. It was all meaningless games. So I'm not wrapped up that someone's for 2 weeks had a WCR of 115 or 120, and they're ready to anoint some guy as the answer, because it's unfair to
Right.
that player, and
Yeah.
it's certainly insulting to the industry and the sport, that you do the things in the course of a game to win the game. But when you're losing at a 60% clip, you justify liking your team by embracing the few numbers that you can say paint a prettier picture of what we're doing. And it's sad. It I almost rather game 5. The Dodgers were going to win that game. Just an epic type of game, well played, well pitched. Someone coming up, just maybe a little hesitation, not knowing where a ball was. But the Yankees to just kick the ball around, and then even in the 8th inning to not, they get a leadoff hit and then a walk and then whatever else, and then the Dodgers kind of masterfully get the run with or 2 runs with a couple of sac flies, and just put the Yankees on their heels. Where even that 8th inning, you really feel it? Did you root for the end? Did you really think it was over? You were Tommy Canely? Is he really going to get that part of the order out? It's like sometimes that one leadoff hit just creates so much havoc. And we saw what a Tommy Edmonds has been. We saw Kike Hernandez repeatedly comes through in these kind of supportive roles where he has a bigger role. But if in terms of baseball, Ohtani got a ring, and the
Yeah.
Dodgers won. They played the Yankees. I'm sure they would have loved at least a game 6 just to get that build up with one more game. I don't think it was a classically great World Series in terms of how the games were played. Freddie Freeman, to be honest, that grand slam was the world's, like, the feeling was like, I don't know how the Yankees get off the mat, and that's just so
Yeah. It
crushing
was gut
to
punch.
it was like that's as bad a loss as you can get. And I felt the World Series ended that night, to be honest. The Dodgers, that feeling of invincibility had to be through the roof, and it certainly, they played like it was.
Well, last thing I'll say about the World Series before we move on to some Marlins news surrounding the manager position, which we'll have plenty to talk about. Doesn't it feel like yesterday or last night, Judge hits the home run and Jazz, who's hitting cleanup that night, follows up back to back, deep drive, no doubt home run. And in that moment, I just thought to myself, Joe, I said, it feels like Jazz was a Marlin in another lifetime. Like he's
Yeah.
so far past his era in Miami,
Yep.
where the only people thinking about Jazz Chisholm Jr. in a Marlins uniform are Marlins fans. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And to me, that's just it's kind of bittersweet because I really am a big fan of Jazz and I love seeing him in that stage in New York. But as a Marlins fan, it's like, wow, like the franchise is just so, for lack of a better term, disrespected across Major League Baseball
Yeah.
and their fans. Where people mention Jazz, if you're a casual baseball fan, oh yeah, the Yankee star. Well, what about the Marlins? Like no one remembers that,
No
and
one
no one
remembers
will
it.
remember
No one
that.
remembers it. No.
So
No,
it's
they
just,
didn't. I mean, Jazz
yeah,
is he's obviously a terrific athlete, terrific talent. He hasn't been necessarily the most consistently terrific player. But yeah, you're right. And when they had Yelich and Stanton and when they were legit dudes, um, and going to other me when I traveled doing so many games on the road and hearing people like who's Giancarlo Stanton, who's like, they were invisible with Stanton. They were invisible
right.
with all those people, and it's my frustration for 2024 and the Marlins not going for it, at least trying to, is that even though I didn't think initially the 23 team was going to be that good, obviously things fell their way in a big way. But the bottom line is the bottom line. They went to the playoffs and they were in a position to build on some sort of momentum,
Yeah.
but then just to not try, just to punt it away and justify it and completely justify it. And I'm the idiot in their eyes, and they're all right. Yet that's why my outrage and my frustration was for the market. And I wasn't being some straw man about it, like I was accused of. But the people that accuse me of this are just buddies with someone in the marketing department. They're part of a little clique of people who like it. Then they say some things on Twitter and get free merchandise sent to them. Then they're all happy and they parade around their new, Marlins hat. And I think that everything they do is just wonderful. And it's like you just set this market back so far because 100 losses are really hard to bounce back from, psychologically and everything. That doesn't mean obviously the Royals, they went to the playoffs this year, but everyone here is always using a comp. Oh, the Royals did it, so next year the Marlins are going to do it. Or we have all our pitchers on the IL, but next year they're all coming back and they're all going to win 20 games. It's like it's always that weird hyperbolic overcorrection the other
And
way.
unrealistic too. You know,
It's
with
completely.
in regard to the pitchers coming back, like I've had to tell people, you guys don't understand that just because Luzardo and Sandy and Yuri and Braxton, they're all coming back. You think they're going to pitch 190 innings each? It's not going to happen. That's not how
And
baseball
how do we
works.
know they're coming back? I mean,
Right.
Yuri's coming back when? He had surgery in what,
That's
the
an
end
excellent
of
point.
April or May?
Excellent
Like
point.
when? I mean, 14 months usually is minimum, but they're
Right.
acting like 13 or 12. And then if you're not going for it next year, what's the rush anyway?
What's the rush?
You already
Exactly.
rushed them. You already messed with them in 23 and that wasn't Peter's fault, but it was, Kim and Sherman's fault, we don't really expect to be here, but now we're kind of here and he's really pitching well. And, but he's a baby. We don't really want to put the innings on his
You
arm.
got
So
to
we
take
shut
care
him
of
down
them.
a month. But they're not going to. They don't know how to take care of them. I mean, look what they did. You did the podcast a month or so ago about what they did to the first round pick. You're doing
Yeah.
weightlifting. You're doing bench press competitions and rain delays. You tell me they're
Right.
going to take care of them? They're not going to take it. In their mind, they're taking care of them. It's like everyone's playing. Everyone's like, you see the movie Let's Be Cops. Remember that kind of comedy, Let's Be
I've,
Cops?
I've heard of it.
Oh yeah, it was like I forgot the actors. The guy is like, what? It'd be fun to be a cop. So they like put a cop uniform on and he's stopping people, and and that's almost
Right.
like what the people in the Marlins are. It's like, let's be a big league front office person. Let's be a big league manager, and we'll just go on Twitter all day and just tell everyone how great we are and how much we know, and everybody else is stupid. It's almost like they're pretending to being what you just saw. What we saw, not just the World Series. The Dodgers Padres is probably the best rivalry in baseball right now. That's insane.
Oh, it's
And
intense.
and the thing
They
about
hate
it
each
is, I
other.
was watching those games, in August. I didn't wait
Yeah.
to the play because that's I stay up to 2 o'clock watching West Coast games all the time because
Yeah.
that's where the real baseball was.
I'm the same way. I was watching a lot of Padres games, and I've always watched the Dodgers a long time. And I mean, to your point of the rivalry, like the Padres and Dodgers, they hate each other. I mean, their
Yeah,
fan
their
bases hate each
fans hit
other. It's
each other.
intense, you know?
Yeah, they're yelling at the fans and mocking
Mhm.
them, and the fans are no one wants the fans throwing stuff. I'm not condoning that,
Right.
but you want the passion.
Right.
You
And
want
that's
you
something
yeah,
I
I
don't
don't want that.
feel with the
It's over the
Marlins.
top where fans are beating each other up in the stands and in the concourses, and that's stupid. But you want that. This is my team. That you want the
Mhm.
rivalry. You want
Yeah.
the passion. You
It
know.
almost feels like a college football, with them, with the
Yes.
level of intensity. And as a Marlins fan, like, who do we have that even rivals somewhat of a rivalry? There isn't one because the fans
The
aren't
Phillies
there.
and Mets to some degree in recent
Yeah,
years, but not because the Marlins aren't really there fighting with them.
right.
You know,
That's the
and for all
point.
those people who thought punting was a good idea, like, is it really was all about Sandy Alcantara? Like that's what it was always about Sandy. Like, oh, if we lose Sandy, like look at all the pitchers the Dodgers were at with that. Look at all the and I get it, they're the Dodgers, but all I know is when I saw the Royals play, I saw Gurriel start a game, I saw Garrett Hampson start a game, I saw
Yep.
John Birdie start at first base, I saw Jazz start at third base, Arise, starting, for San Diego. That's five position players off the top of my head who were on the Marlins playoff team last year and all
Yeah.
five of them would have been part of, and then all the relievers the Marlins had that could have at least given a shot. And to my boy over there, with his the publication guy they do the prospect sites all the time. Oh, how could they trade if they signed Soler? How could they trade Soler? Well, who just traded Soler to the Angels? Soler's been traded twice since signing that contract. He got traded by the Giants to the Braves, and the Braves just traded him. Did you see that, to the
Yeah.
Angels?
Yeah. Just came out.
So it's like that's what you do. You sign Soler in Miami, and if you fall out of it and
Then you
he's
trade
not
them.
part of what you want to do, you can trade him. But
Right.
the know it all, you have a podcast and whatever, and talk prospects, and everybody is the best prospect. So you got it, and I'm the old fart who doesn't know what I'm talking about. It's like you get what we get. We operate minor leagueish, we act minor leagueish, and we want to only promote the minor leagues because that's the only thing that is somewhat hopeful. And now I'm sure we'll get to why the Marlins don't have a manager.
Yeah. Well, Jeff Passan from ESPN reported. So let me preface this for all the listeners or watchers out there who haven't been keeping up to date with this. The Marlins were down supposedly to two finalists for their managerial spot. You had Craig Albernaz, who is the bench coach for the Guardians, and then you had Will Venable, who's a former player, many years with the Padres.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. He's currently on the coaching staff with the Texas Rangers. I'm not sure what
It's like some
position.
sort of some sort of highfalutin,
Yeah,
analytical hitting type of assistant type of coach role.
but Will Venable, so we're down to those two slots. So those two or people for one position. And so Marlins fans, the news comes out. We're starting to learn more about these guys. Will Venable, it turns out just the other day, decides, no, I'm not going with the Marlins. I'm going to be the next manager of the Chicago White Sox, were the worst team in baseball and one of the worst
Yeah,
teams ever in Major League
yeah,
Baseball. So
historically bad.
right. And it makes you kind of wonder a little bit. Okay, so it looks like Craig Albernaz is the guy. He's the guy. Bench Coast Cleveland Guardians. Grew up in the Tampa Bay Rays organization, so there were some ties there to Peter Bendix. And in my
And
mind, I
Gabe
felt
Kapler.
and Gabe Kapler. So in your mind, you think, okay, well, this is it. And news literally broke just before we hit record, Joe. Craig will be staying in Cleveland as the bench coach, viewed all across Major League Baseball as a potential manager, future manager material.
Somewhere.
He says, I don't want to go to Miami. I'm going to stay in Cleveland. What do we make of that?
Yeah, he withdrew his name.
Right.
He withdrew his name. Okay, so this is funny because the irony, because I heard from some, and I trust I'm not spending a ton of time like making phone calls related to the Marlins, but I did hear this literally before the news of Venable yesterday or the day before. I can't remember. It might have been yesterday. That ironically Venable and Albanaz were in line for the White Sox job.
Mm.
Now, I will say this in fairness, and the Marlins have a long way to go to get out of the cellar. The White Sox literally might be worse in terms
They
of what
are
they have
worse.
there.
I think they're
But
worse.
but what the White Sox have, and Reinsdorf isn't, he takes his shots, and rightfully so for a lot of things. But Jerry Reinsdorf has this going for him. For the most part, there's a level of loyalty, and he treats people that work for him very well. And I
Mm.
know this on individual levels of veteran people, whether in scouting departments who may have had like a spouse pass away, and he would pay for the funeral, like literally would do such. If you worked for him and were loyal with him, he was very loyal, and that's one reason why they got in the boat they were in. He hung around with people probably past time, didn't make as many moves. But for all the people who say, why would you not want to come to Miami and go to Chicago? For one, you have somebody in an organization there with a track record of loyalty and caring on a human level. So I was always thinking with Albernaz is if he's the great next whatever, why limit yourself to the Marlins job? And then when you take it back to, and this is where we need to do some self-reflecting, and it could be easy for me to just beat this up and just come across as bitter. I'm going to try to offer some suggestions because it's greatly needed. For one, I heard there were other people interviewed. I just heard through the grapevine that the interviewing process here was odd to say, and I'm using the word odd instead of the exact word because I don't want to, if that word was passed along, get my people who talk to me in any type of situation. But let's put it this way: the interviews with other candidates were kind of like head scratchers.
Mm.
Like there was very much a confusing, like what's going on here. And let's be clear, what the Marlins are trying to do, and I think I talk a lot about Bendix, but Kapler may be really the power behind the king, because power behind the throne too, because everyone, there are a lot of people that came to Bendick's defense for letting 70 people go. And people are like, oh, you're bitter. Some of your sources got fired. No, I'm bitter because 70 people got fired. And
Yeah, 70 jobs were lost.
we're talking about people that had no business losing their jobs in Major League Baseball for, like just jobs that had nothing to do with who was on, just employees. Once you
Right.
take all that down, and then you hear, oh, well, Bendix wants to hire his people. Right? He's getting his people now. Well, I heard this through the grapevine. I don't think contractually he could do anything with anybody in the Rays system for at least another year.
Interesting.
So if he's cleaning house now for his people, let's say half of those people, or at least a couple, could be with the Rays. I don't think contractually he can do it.
Wow.
So why are you? And I saw you a couple of months ago when Oz was not
Yeah.
retained, and others were not retained. But this is what it gets down to. If you're clearly the Marlins are trying, they have a vision of they're going to be 100% analytics, and so is the manager even important to them, other than just somebody that could hold the clubhouse together? Um, then just some insight here. So why wouldn't Kapler necessarily want to because a lot of people just assume when Kapler got hired, he was hired to replace Skip. I thought that originally back when he got hired,
And it
because
made
you knew
sense.
Skip
Yeah.
wasn't going to be. But think of it this way: they're not expecting to win in 25. As much as people will say it, why would Kapler want to go? Kapler may want to run everything, or at least have a very strong voice in running things, which he already has behind the scenes. You're just not hearing much from him. And why would he go in the dugout and lose 100 games again? Now it's on him. So the next manager is going to be coming in. I'm sure if Kapler has aspirations to get back in the dugout, he probably would want to do it. Let somebody else come in, teach the players, the kids, and hopefully the prospects become good, and they look, whatever that window is. Whether it's 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, if they catch lightning in a bottle, if all these kids all just it clicks and there's a magical year, um, you basically, what is this manager going to do? Is the manager just going to be with the and you always this is a weird thing about baseball, and it's like you're either going for it or you're not. That's one thing David Sampson talked about, and he was basically right. It's kind of hard to just pretend you're doing both, because you don't really like. I've used Griffin Conine as a quick example. Conine has shown power. He's shown he's got a strong arm. So he can play a pretty good right field. He's got a strong arm. And you make a mistake there, he could do some serious damage. Well, how many games do we see where the Marlins are losing in the ninth inning, or yeah, they were losing in the ninth inning, and Conine has a chance to come up. But I think one game was against a lefty closer. I want to say Hader, but it may not have been against the Astros. Somebody had a lefty, but they took Conine out to go with Dave Meyer, let's say, because the matchup would have called for that. Well, all I know is Griffin Conine could hit really far home runs, but we're never going to allow him to see what he could. Again, doesn't matter if you lose 100 games, 102 games, 98 games,
In the
97 games,
pressure
you still
situation.
stunk. Why don't you want to see at least what he can do? And
Yeah.
if it's already preordained, that's the big problem with probability and all this is everyone's preordained, defined of what kind of player you are. So what are we going to do with these prospects? Are we going to see, because Connor Norby's going to struggle. He has some talent. He's not an automatic 10-year all-star. He showed a lot of holes. There are people looking at him a little differently than they did when he had his hot streak. Doesn't mean he can't be a decent or a good player. But are you going to just allow him to see what he can be? Or are you going to constantly, oh man, he
Play
went
the
2 straight games
matchup.
without a hit.
Yeah.
He's on the bench. So this guy's coming in. So everyone's a piece. So there's no real player development of the player to make them a rounded player, completed player. This is how you get situations where guys don't know how to cover first base. Now, I know it's elementary in theory, but when you're constantly going to program your prospects to only be used a certain way, outfielders, from what I understand, don't take fungos in the minor leagues. They use machines to
Wow.
fling the balls out there. So do you really even need coaches? It's like it's a weird type of thing the way the Marlins are doing things, which is again, I think we had this conversation early on about maybe some guys being drafted that if they're a college guy or a high school guy and get drafted by the Marlins, do I really want to go there? The Marlins, if the Marlins are so set in doing things a uniquely different Marlins way, well, how are you going to find a coach or a manager candidate outside this organization to come in here to basically be a puppet to this way that no one
Yeah.
really knows what it is?
Well, I mean, that you said it right there, puppet, and that's kind of the word, honestly, that comes to my mind when I think of the next manager. Because at first, Skip built a winning culture, and then he leaves. Okay, what's next? Well, it's kind of clear right now. The next manager, whoever it is probably going to be, without a doubt, a first-time manager. Okay, we've already seen them
Yeah,
want to go in that direction. A first-time manager and somebody that is really going to play second fiddle to Bendix and the analytical approach. And that means when it comes to the everyday aspect of baseball, as we'll wrap this up in a couple minutes here, when it comes to the everyday aspect, going to the field, your preparation, um, analytics can only take you so far. We've talked about this plenty, Joe, and I've said it's a tool and it's a really good tool, but it's not everything. And I think of this quote from the late Pete Rose. I saw a short video on him the other day. They were interviewing him, I believe in MLB Network studios or whatnot. And they asked him. They said, Pete, when you were in a slump, what did you do? How did you get out of that slump? And he goes, I go up in the box, I go back in the box, I go to the plate, I go further from the plate. I tell everybody, I say, you don't change your swing because your swing is what got you to the big leagues. Okay.
yeah,
And I love that quote because that can be applied to every level of baseball, including the big leagues. And
correct.
so these new players coming in with the Marlins, it's going to be imperative that they stick to who they are and that they just go out and try to ignore all the business aspect of it, the analytical aspect of it, and just play ball. Focus on the fundamentals, like we talked at the beginning of the podcast. Run your drills, take your at bats and your swings, because ultimately, hard work is just as important as these adjustments and analytical components of the game. It takes both.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And it's a you want to be analytically informed, but not necessarily analytically driven.
Right.
And if you're a baseball person, you see that you're because you're a human being. Like I said, maybe Griffin Cohen, I could hit lefties a lot better than we know, and maybe he'll face a lefty and strike out 10 straight times, but then see something in the next 10 at bats. Then next thing you know, wow, he's kind of picked up something.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden you got a guy who could be, just productive. And from his point of view, whether it's with the Marlins or elsewhere, where he could have a big league future, whether it's a fourth outfielder or, an everyday type of guy. But when you're always limiting them to, oh, you're a 200 at bat guy. You're going to be that's why you don't necessarily want a team all filled with platoon people. You don't necessarily want this Rays way, whatever that is. Rays always had really good players. And the thing with the Rays way is they have very good player development. They do a lot on the field in how they go about preparing in the minor leagues and stuff. The Rays aren't just this analytically driven team. They like all teams use analytics. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Everyone does.
All 30. Yeah.
We act like they got a patent on it, and they just fired their whole analytics department. I mean,
Yeah.
so obviously the analytics is, those people. What did they do wrong? Oh, they just read the wrong column. So again, it's like it's very frustrating, and they're learning some hard lessons, but if there is something to be learned or to watch for. I mean, no one's really explained the Skip leaving, although we kind of know. But isn't that pretty eye-opening?
Yeah.
Isn't that
I mean,
opening? He'd
I think it's
rather,
as clear as he just doesn't want to be here. Why
he
would he?
and then they try to spin it as they offered him something. It's the
Yeah.
same lie that was with Kim. It's like Kim was pushed out the door. She wasn't up for a contract. They needed to redo it. The fact that they waited, they never did it, and it never was announced or even leaked. It made me think at the end of last year that I'm so sure she's back, because normally when you're back, there's some sort of hint, some sort of we'll make an announcement. Hey, it's with the contracts on the desk. It's a formality. We'll get it all done. But when you sit around and then you have people come at me, I love it. The people come at me like I know more in my sleep than what these people know when they're awake. And it's like, it was all save face. Just because
Mm.
the team says something, oh, okay, you could come back for a pay cut and you're underneath somebody. Well, we offered to come back.
Right.
Is
It's
it?
not
That's
how
not the
it
way the big
appears.
leagues work. Nobody in the major league level or any professional sports league operates that way. No one's like, okay, I'll take that. Yeah, that's a great gig. I'll just sit over there and you give me a 1-year contract and leave me alone. And you're not going to listen to me anyway. So why am I here? I'm just here taking a contract just because. And then the people that said, well, why didn't they do this? The optics of it, that's just a lie. And that's a fail for the media that pushes that. Then just say it. We were the only ones kind of saying it, and Geffner, that it was all a lie. 24 was a big lie. Oh,
Yeah.
we're going for it. No, no.
They weren't
Say
ever
if you
going
want to
for it.
rebuild, say you're rebuilding, but don't sit around and say to Skip Schumacher, who was manager here, went to the playoffs, was expecting to, at least get a chance to see what they could do in 24, and then act like you're doing him a favor by taking his option away, like that was some benevolent thing of them to do. And then, to on his way out, that never once all year do you hear about. And I get it, Skip didn't want to talk about it, but so what? If the media's job is to make people, it's not their job to necessarily, that's what we. If I were on the beat, we've been asking her all the time. He could have said,
Right.
"Stop asking." I still would have been asking it, and or not, and not expecting it on with camera on, but I would have known where it's sized up. And then Bendix is a 13-minute press conference down at the stadium, and just says it's a private conversation. I want. It's like you could give an explanation. You could
Yeah,
say anything from.
accountability. It always comes down to
You could
accountability.
say it's a philosophical differences. You could say something that, hey, the direction that we want to go wasn't necessarily matched up with Skip right now.
Mhm.
And you don't have to say, well, he said this on the phone call and I said that in the phone call. Because guess what? Your next managerial candidates see what you're saying or not saying and see the fact, and they are asking themselves, wait, let's see what's going on. Until they want some continuity and some commitment. I mean, they were firing people who had a lot of years in this company, in this organization. And in some cases, the department heads had other fired employees calling up these people to tell them they were fired.
Wow.
So until you start treating people with a little dignity, a little bit of respect, this is what you're going to get. And you're going to be getting, John Jay. Oh, they wanted him back in some capacity. Yeah, he was like, I'm going to St. Louis. You know. So the manager might be the guy who was the bench coach who interviewed and picked it up when Skip, didn't manage the team the final weekend. He might be the last one.
Time's gonna tell. Time's gonna tell, but for now, this is gonna be an interesting offseason. Definitely a lot to cover, a lot to get into as we continue with this podcast. And Joe, it's been a really good episode with you. We're gonna get this
I
out
appreciate that.
tonight.
You know what? I'm
And
gonna before we go, I'm gonna say
yeah,
who's the player in the fall league? The guy in the fall league for the Marlins. What's it? Pintar. What's his
Andrew
name?
Pintar.
Andrew Pintar. Keep an eye on him. Yeah, he's somebody. He could be real. So we'll
Yeah.
give a ray of hope on that. And good for the Kemp guy who's hitting the ball 120 miles an hour almost at the fall league. Good job
Oh
by
yeah.
DJ Spillett to draft him. So we'll give a little bit of a high note there. And look, I don't know if that guy is going to hit for any type of if he could handle big league pitching, but when you're hitting the ball 119, that's pretty elite level, exit
There's some tools
velocity.
there. There's
So
something there.
there's some power there and there's enough mediocre pitching that that good for him. Congratulations to him for doing that. But the Pintar kid is a prospect. I don't know where people have that guy, but he should be in the top 10 on the Marlins list. So
I like it.
that's my ray of hope as
See,
you know
guys,
I'm not
Joe is
just
talking prospects for all you
yeah
out there who always bash him. Joe's talking prospects with you.
yeah yeah. I told you the good ones, not the ones.
I love it. All right, Joe. Thank you again. And to everybody out there, happy
All right, Jeremiah,
Halloween
have a good
and
night.
let's go fish.